The Curmudgeon Rock Report. Curmudgeon rhymes with bludgeon. Rock gods do it right. So do rock nerds. We're here for the rock. 1965, 2021, doesn't matter. Crude, rude, yet somehow sophisticated. Welcome. Enjoy the show.
Hello again, everyone. This is the latest and we think greatest episode of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. We've been doing this now for almost 2 months, and we're starting to resemble an outfit that actually knows what it's doing. And for the 12 people in our regular audience out there, we give a shout out. Come back to us in a year, and we'll be world famous and widely lauded. But in the meantime, it's just a couple of assholes talking shit about music and talking shit about each other. On that note, Arturo, how the fuck you doing?
Good. Greetings from South Korea. And I'd like to say first, the sound quality for my voice for today's episode, we're going back to the webcam mic, and there's a reason for that. Last episode was the first episode that we recorded with me using a real microphone, and I sounded really well, right? I sounded really good and very clear. But apparently, because we use Zencastr to record this podcast, and we're having 3 people on today's episode, myself, Chris, and a guest. And for some reason, my Zencastr cannot pick up my mic if there are more than 2 people on. So I had to unplug the brand new mic and go with my webcam mic. So just for this one episode, we're going back to the old sound of me sounding like I'm phoning it in from some long distance location. Sorry about that to our loyal listeners, but that's just a little tech glitch that we just couldn't overcome. So for this episode, I'm using the webcam mic, but starting next episode, we're going back to my clear, clean sounding new mic.
And that might be the most unintentionally funny line in this whole episode, with you talking about sounding like you're long distance when you're in Gwangju, South Korea. For our American fan base, that's quite a kick. Now, you did mention a third person on the line.
Yes.
I'm intrigued. Who is this third person?
This person is one of a very, very good mutual friend of ours and one of my closest friends. He is live from Philadelphia. His name is Michael, if you want to be professional, Eisenstein. Mike Eisenstein is, like I said, one of my oldest, closest friends, dating back to my years when I worked in the Nature Publishing Group. Before I became an English teacher, I worked in the publishing business, and he worked in the same company with me. He is currently a freelance science journalist, and he has been working at this position in this job for many years, and currently he is under exclusive contract with Johns Hopkins University for exclusive coverage of the coronavirus and all things COVID-19 related. That means interviewing scientists, doctors, medical health experts from all over the country, perhaps internationally. I'm not even sure about that. But he's the closest thing we have to an expert on the coronavirus. And we need that because this episode is going to be a little more serious than the ones we've done before. We're not talking about other bands and other artists or taking a shit on them or praising certain albums or whatnot. This whole episode is going to be about the effect that the coronavirus has had, particularly on the live touring and concert industry. And Mike, being the COVID expert who writes about this for a living and does a lot of it, is the guest that we have on to talk about this. Mike, why don't you chime in?
Hey guys, good to be here. Long time listener, first time caller, and I appreciate the invite. I just want to say I am not exclusive Johns Hopkins. I am one of their team. But you can also I do write also for Nature and for Nature Biotechnology, so you can check out some of my stuff there. And but yeah, I'm really thrilled to be with you today. And this is I'm really enjoying the show you guys are doing. I think this is a great opportunity to kind of bring some science into the music mix.
It sounds much better if you are the exclusive Johns Hopkins guy. Come on, man.
Oh, I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they should fire everybody else and just put me on permanent retainer. But
we can't puff you up too much, but just the fact that you're stringing for Johns Hopkins, I think Arturo undersold that. You definitely, from a journalism point of view, are in one of the best seats in the House because as far as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the two most valued data sources among scientists and journalists and watchers of these things are the CDC and Johns Hopkins. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, there was also the late and lamented the COVID tracking project, which was started by some journalists. Actually, I think it was out of the Atlantic, Alexis Madrigal and a couple other folks, which was doing really amazing work in the absence of sort of a national coordinated response in the United States. But yeah, Hopkins has been right on top of it. They've been really monitoring the situation really well. So it's been great working with them and talking to their experts. They've got some really amazing people working there, and it's great to have the opportunity to hear firsthand what they're up to.
I gotcha. So that's the credential part of this. More personally, I understand you're a North Shore guy, right? Or Worcester?
No, I'm a Metro West boy. I'm the so-called Metro West area of Boston. A bunch of lesser suburbs within the sort of half-hour train ride from the city.
Okay, I got you. And my understanding is you're a Brown University guy too, correct?
That is right. Yeah. Did my time in Providence for a while. Slowly making my way down the East Coast.
I'm imagining that means you're you can't help but be a Modern Lovers fan, correct? If you're caught in the Boston corridor. Yeah.
Well, but also I know I'm going to get dragged for this, but I'm also an Aerosmith fan. I mean, I was just like, old habits die hard.
There's nothing wrong with early Aerosmith. Toys in the Attic and Rocks are two awesome, classic, all-time great records.
Oh, their Permanent Vacation tour was one of the first concerts I ever went to.
Oh, wow.
When I must have been I think I must have been 14 or 15. And my cousin took me because my mom couldn't have been bothered and my dad couldn't have been bothered. But my cousin Julie, who rocks, she took me, and my friend Jeff. And that was the first time I ever smelled weed, and it was quite an experience.
Yeah, I was going to say it was life-changing. Yeah, you all of a sudden saw the world through green-colored glasses.
Yeah, the Worcester Centrum, man. Like life changed the Worcester Centrum that day.
Yeah. God bless Worcester. My dad grew up in Springfield, Mass, and so I'm more of a Western Mass guy. So I miss my my New England roots. I'm down here in Houston, Texas now, of all places. But and that actually, before we get going, this is a good segue because we're going to be talking about live music and our experiences as concert goers and contemplating the future. Arturo, what was your first concert?
First concert I ever went to. Oh my God. I think the first show I ever went to, this is going way back. It may have been Robert Plant in Miami. In Miami at it's like an auditorium that seats about 5,000 people. I forgot the name of it. But I saw him there. I was 12. So it wasn't like I was really hyped up for it. The first concert I went to that I was really hyped up for, that I really that pumped my nads, was seeing the Rolling Stones in Syracuse in 1994 at the Carrier Dome. That was a great show too, because they were older, but they weren't decrepit old like they are now. They were like early 50s, so they could still move around and rock out, and that was a great show. I remember that one. Yeah, that was I call that my first real concert. Where I was excited to see it.
Yeah, but I mean, the Aerosmith wasn't my first show. My first technical show was actually Def Leppard a year before that, and geez, I'm trying to remember. I think it might have been their Pyromania tour. I can't remember. I think it must have been Hysteria. It must have been the Hysteria tour.
Yeah, because Pyromania is like '83, so it must have been Hysteria when that terrible song "Love Bites" was everywhere.
Yeah, but it was also Pour Some Sugar on Me and Animal. Like they had so many hits off that. I saw them in Europe open for them, and Europe, of course, they had exactly one hit. So they played the final countdown, and everyone's like going bananas. And then everyone's like, "Okay, you guys can go now. Can we have Def Leppard, please?"
That's how it was when I saw the Stones. It was the Spin Doctors opening up for them.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And they played the only response they got was when they played those two hits, and that's it. And they were your classic two-hit wonder band, which is an idea I have for a future podcast as well.
My first concert was Prince at the Carrier Dome in 1985.
Wow. That's a hell of a first show.
Yeah, with my father at the Carrier Dome. So my dad is taking me, and he doesn't know much about Prince, and I like Prince at the time, and I remember Dad was having a good old time. He loved it. He thought this was like the most entertaining thing in the world, and I am too. And here I am, 10-year-old kid, and I'm thinking this is great. It's good. And that's back when you could still smoke cigarettes and maybe other stuff. And so you've got the purple lights, but it's like this purple cloud, and it's not effects. This is tobacco.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point during the show, Prince, I think it was like after When Doves Cry or something, he decides to strip butt naked and get into a tub. And here I am, this 10-year-old kid, like, oh, what? And my father just starts laughing. He's like, yeah, okay. What are you going to do? I'm bringing my kid to a show and the guy gets butt naked in the tub. But no, it was fun. It was just, it was one of those things. Prince was a showman, but as a shameless plug, I still like Michael Jackson better. So there you go.
Well, we're all entitled to our wrong opinions.
Oh yeah, well, you're entitled to your own delusions,
dude. At that time, even by the mid '80s, Michael Jackson was already past his prime, whereas Prince was still was sustaining his prime.
Point, folks, we're going to talk about this much more in depth, probably in about 6 weeks or so. And so, Prince versus Michael Jackson. I have Michael. Arturo has Prince. Mike, Arturo, Michael or Prince?
Oh, Prince. I mean, for Lifetime Achievement, Prince. Michael Jackson has an amazing front half of his career. I mean, there's just he's just got an unassailable front catalog. From his Jackson 5 work, Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad. Mm-hmm. He lost me after Bad. I was not a big fan of Dangerous, and I just kind of like it was diminishing returns for me.
According to a lot of little kids, Michael Jackson has a great rear half as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Prince had lots of ups and downs, but I think, over his career, and when you think about the artists that he nurtured in terms of like creating a new generation of proteges, I think definitely had more of a lasting impact. And dude, that fucker could tear a guitar apart. I mean, he was just amazing.
He was great. I mean, he was a talent, but I mean, I'll still take Michael for reasons I'll keep to myself now. It's a tease. I said, reach out to us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com and tell us, who do you have? Do you have Michael or do you have Prince? And now back to regularly scheduled program. So, like we said at the top of the show, we're here to talk about coronavirus and COVID-19 and this ongoing, seemingly never-ending pandemic. And one thing that has been a commonality is the shutdown of the world, and this includes live music. And so we've been left with lots of garage performances and phony baloney DIY video at-home performances from like Metallica and others. And obviously this has had a huge impact on everybody, but especially touring musicians and those of us that once in a while like to go to a show and get blasted out of the building and then buy a $35 t-shirt and then struggle to get home. You can tell that sometimes I'm not the most enthusiastic guy about concert going, but a lot of people are, and they haven't been able to do it for a year. So we wanted Mike to come on because we needed some adult supervision to sort of think about these issues. And we're at the point now. I was vaccinated last week. Mike was telling us that he gets. Are you 2 shots or 1 shot?
I'm doing Pfizer. I start shot 1 tomorrow.
Okay, I did J&J last week, so I was 1 and done. So we're getting there, and so now we're at a critical point where we can look back, look at where we are now, and look at the road ahead as far as the restoration of live music and the concert business. And not only that, but the very livelihood and survival of the young generation of rock and roll bands and touring artists. So on that note, before I get into the questions, Mike, do you have any opening thoughts or any sort of observations to share up front, any sort of prologue?
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned that a lot of artists have had to kind of adapt, and I think what's been really cool is that for the most part, I think most musicians have recognized that this is sort of a necessary sacrifice for the greater good, the public health. I mean, most artists have tried to adapt, and a lot of people have had to really suffer in terms of losing a major source of revenue. Obviously, royalties aren't what they used to be. Streaming payments are criminally low, and maybe if you're lucky, you can get some kind of patron system, some kind of subscriber system. But what I find interesting is you can tell a lot about an artist's character. The ones that chose to make a big fuss about this. I mean, you've got your Kid Rock keeping his bar and grill open in, I think it was Tennessee, and Smash Mouth performing at Sturgis, and and of course, everybody's favorite racist guitar god, Eric Clapton and Van Morrison.
Van Morrison, with their whole anti-mask shtick.
Which hurts me. I'm a big Van Morrison fan, so that pains me to see him go toe that line, which that really sucks. That he's.
I was bummed about that too. I didn't see that coming. Like I got to say, I don't know a lot about Van's politics, but I just sort of thought of him as more open-minded, considerate.
I read the Van Morrison biography by Johnny Rogan, who's like one of my favorite writers. He's a music writer, and Van's never been that political. Like, he's not really a political person. I mean, he's generally leftist, as far as like freedoms and rights and stuff like that. But I think he's generally warped. I mean, he's been a rich, famous person for the vast majority of his life. And I think that's completely clouded his judgment. He's seen things from his pristine Northern Irish castle and all his vassals below. Like, oh, wait, wear masks. Oh, no, this is taking money from my pocket. I can't perform anymore. And I think he's seeing that, and he's not seeing the big picture. Whereas Eric Clapton is a traditional dickhead. So we expect that from him. Yeah. And he's I don't think he's purely a racist guy. I just think he's an asshole.
Wanna Be Startin' Something is an unbelievable achievement and a damn near perfect song. The Ballad of Dorothy Parker is an unbelievable achievement and a damn near perfect song. An argument over whether Michael Jackson or Prince was the better artist is a bit like arguing over whether cookies and cream is better than chocolate chip cookie dough. But I'm sticking to my guns that Michael was the more brilliant and important of the two. Arturo thinks that's a ridiculous statement, and he'll soon share at least 100 reasons why he thinks he's right. In the meantime, you tell us, is Wanna Be Startin' Something the better song? Or is it The Ballad of Dorothy Parker? Hit us up at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com with your truth on the matter. So let's really get into sort of the formal discussion here. Yeah. So when you look at the past year, how would you quantify or describe the impact that this whole thing has had on these artists and really on the culture and on everything that's happened?
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about this before getting on that. The three of us are all kind of like we sort of have radically different experiences of what the pandemic has been like. Art, you live in South Korea, which was like kind of setting a gold standard for responding quickly and testing rapidly and kind of containing it. Texas obviously has had their own approach.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yep.
And Philadelphia, I think, we've done well in some things and not so well in other things, and I think we've tried to be responsible in a lot of ways in terms of like closures and trying to keep people from congregating indoors. But it's been rough. I mean, I was reading that 88 music venues permanently went out of business in the U.S. As a consequence of the pandemic. We lost one in Philadelphia that very near dear to my heart, the Boot and Saddle, a old converted country western honky tonk that was rehabbed and turned into just this really nice intimate performance space. That went under. That was not able to sustain itself. And there are major cities all over the U.S. permanently lost some great venues as a consequence of this. It's sad. There's not much you can do about that. I mean, there are things you can do about that, but I should say that we were not taking the steps as a country to protect them. And it's
and that's the thing here. I mean, to me the main impact. Yeah, obviously. These artists, rock and roll artists these days, or at least in the last 10 years, I mean, it's not like, make an album, go out, support it, and sell t-shirts. Okay, yeah, you do that. Okay, you can still make out the albums, but like you said, from streaming, you're not making you can't make a living as a recording artist without also touring all the time. And it's like the recording it's like you go out and tour, you sell your t-shirts, and you come back and you use your profit to make
touring subsidizes recording for the vast majority of younger bands and artists. It's the most important thing for them, because touring is all, like Chris said, is also how they sell their merchandise. Unless they get a really kick-ass knockout licensing deal with some corporation that puts their songs in TV commercials or in movies. Unless they get a really knockout licensing deal, they're living on the road. They're living off that, and it's sad that so many venues have gone under. But and we'll get to this point later on as one of my points. Like how many bands and artists will be able to go on making a living making music? They can't support it touring.
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, I think we'll definitely get back to that. I mean, what I think is, there were definitely some artists who came up with some creative solutions. I mean, my wife had tickets to see Nick Cave before the lockdowns began, and once everything started closing down, he ended up basically doing an HD quality streamed show. It was actually really neat. It was a live performance from, I think it was a castle in England. And it was just him solo with a grand piano in the middle of this gigantic ballroom playing for 2 hours. And it was great. He was playing like really like old stuff, like some real deep cuts from his catalog. It was just him and the piano, just piles of sheet music next to him. And it was a great experience, but it was definitely, it was a weird hybrid. I mean, definitely it felt intimate, but it also, obviously it isn't the same as being in a live venue. And like, we did, it was a paid ticket, and it was still, a transactional. I mean, he benefited from that, but I didn't see a lot of that from artists. Most of the artists that I saw were doing like free stuff on Instagram. I mean, you had like people like Ben Gibbard and Jason Isbell doing their free performances. Ben Folds, John.
Yeah. Well, and I was also like the Swiss Beats had that Versus series going on where it was like, well, the first one was RZA versus DJ Premier, and then they came up with all kinds of weird ones, like just folks you wouldn't think would have any kind of things to do with each other, and so you did get some fascinating creativity. And Arturo, I admire your restraint about holding off on the notion of Nick Cave in a castle. Because
here's the thing: I generally speaking, I do like Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds. I'm not a fan at all of his recent work, though. I think it's terrible. Yeah. I mean, it's just one continuously slow funeral dirge after another. Like how much mileage can you get out of your son's death already? You've done 2 albums of it already. I mean, come on.
You're a man of deep sympathy, Arthur.
In Tears in Heaven territory. I mean, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Go back to rocking out, man. Come on.
Yeah. He did go back to, he was playing stuff like Mercy Seed. He was going, he was going back, deeper into the catalog, back to the golden age of Nick Cave. Yeah, so it was definitely like, it was a career spanning.
Believe it or not, I'm a mid-period Nick Cave guy. I like 90s and noughties Nick Cave. like the first Grinder Man album and Dig
great.
Lazarus Dig. I like the Boatman's Call a lot. The 90s Nick Cave and Naughty's Nick Cave I'm a big fan of.
I think Arturo Andrade is the only member of the podcast community who co-hosts an episode of a Rock Nerd podcast dedicated to 565,000 Dead, who then mocks the dead son of one of
I didn't mock his son. I'm mocking his son. I'm mocking him squeezing shitty music out of that death. That's what I'm mocking.
Oh! Thanks for the clarification, because it makes so much more taste.
Eric Clapton is looking down at you right now. He's just like, "Oh man, that guy."
By the way, there's a great quote I have from Anton Newcomb and the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Great quote. This is several years ago, and the issue of Eric Clapton came up, and you know what Newcomb said? He said, "Dude, fuck that guy. What has Eric Clapton ever done in his career besides throw his son out the window and write a shitty song about it?"
Ooh,
that's not my quote. That's Anton Newcomb.
Oh, okay. Wow. This got dark. So we've already
real, yeah.
So we've already joked about two dead people.
I didn't joke. I didn't joke about Nick Cave's son. I just joked about Nick Cave writing shitty songs about his dead son.
Oh, okay. Because again, that's so much better. And I guess this is a good time to point out that in a way you can make an argument that this period for live music is actually worse than the fire at the station in Rhode Island, the Great White Show in 2003, because at least people were allowed to go to that show. So anyway.
That was an issue. Why would people willingly want to go to a Great White Show?
In 2003.
I mean, it's torturing. If I were in the audience, I'd be glad I'd be killed in the fire. I don't want to listen to that band for like 2 hours. Good God.
Yeah. So somehow, folks, remember the email is curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. Please send all hate mail and lawsuits to that address, and we'll gladly respond.
Should we spell Andrade?
Yeah, sure. A-N-D. Okay. Anyway, so
but
I gotta say, I'm actually surprised that it's only 88 venues that have closed. I would have thought it would be more. And
so far, I mean, that's the current reckoning anyway.
Yeah, so far, and of course, I haven't done much reading up on this, but what federal money, like let's say this America Rescue Plan that Biden just signed into law, how much is there for arts relief? I mean,
that's actually some good news, I got to say, and to actually give credit where credit was due, this actually was something that started in the previous negotiations in the the other guy's administration.
Okay.
But when the rescue plan came along, they upped it, and the number was $16 billion in funding for the Save Our Stages Act, is what they were calling it. And what's cool about that is $2 billion of that is reserved for small venues with 50 or fewer employees, which is really neat. I mean, that's really fantastic money, and I think that's really going to make a huge impact for a lot of these struggling clubs. And it's hopefully that and the stimulus will keep some of those the service employees who work there and keep them going for a little bit longer until the venues can open back up again in some capacity.
Yeah, exactly. And so is that mostly a Broadway thing, or is that just sort of go across the board? Is that
it's any performance space. I mean, it could be jazz clubs. It could be it's any artistic performance space. It goes from the Broadway theater. I mean, I'm imagine even someplace like the Hollywood Bowl might be eligible for something like that. I think I think it scales for any kind of performance space.
Okay, yeah.
But the carve out for the small venues, I think, is really important. I mean, again, speaking from the Philadelphia perspective, we do have a couple big venues, but our bread and butter here is we've got some really terrific small clubs. I mean, we get all the acts that come to the East Coast. I mean, pretty much any act that performs in DC, New York, Boston, they all come to Philadelphia, and you can really see a lot of these great acts in these intimate venues. And it would be a real shame to lose those, because you just do some really top-notch shows in a really compact setting where you can really feel just right up in the artist's business. I mean, there's one thing I wanted to talk about, which is the the whole festival thing, and I think this kind of goes into something I think we're going to talk about in a bit. But the other really big open question is everyone talks about the safety of outdoor events versus indoor events, and there's a lot of talk about which of the big outdoor festivals are still going to happen. Whether that's another great money making opportunity for a lot of artists to go to these big multi-day, multi-artist, just jam-packed marquees of performers. And right now there's a couple that are actually still trying. I think Bonnaroo is still on right now for September, as far as I know. I think they actually announced their lineup very ambitiously, perhaps. But and I think Lollapalooza is also still tentatively scheduled for this summer.
How about Glastonbury?
Yeah, I know.
They're canceled.
Yeah,
Glastonbury and Coachella are both.
Coachella definitely canceled. Most of the big ones, but Bonnaroo's in Tennessee, so that shouldn't be a shock. I was going to say, anywhere where there's a red state,
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, is it too early for another Sturgis clusterfuck? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'll definitely see. So, I guess one of the questions from there. So we talked about the impact. So now here we are in this moment where we're in this vaccination period, and the rollouts are happening, and there's some optimism. Obviously, we have these variants that we've been reading about from South Africa and Brazil and Europe and other locations. So, what exactly do we know at this point about the risk of transmission of COVID in both indoor and outdoor settings? I mean, what do we, so what exactly, where are we in terms of the risk? And then do you have any insights or any sources who've told you, sort of their thoughts about the best way to get these places back open?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real problem. There's been a lot of confusing messaging, as everybody knows, over the past year about what we're supposed to do and what's responsible and what's irresponsible. And I got to say, speaking as a science journalist, the CDC has definitely not covered itself in glory under Redfield, the previous director. There was a lot of really confusing information out there, and a lot of states were just kind of winging it. Even states that were trying to do the right thing were winging it. I think what people need to know is that, in general, it's good to do things outside. I mean, it's healthy to do things outside. If you maintain your space from other people, if you, wear a mask when you're not eating or drinking, if you're just kind of a sensible person and keep your, don't cluster together into dense packs, you are so much safer outside than you are inside from transmission. There just aren't, one of the things that's really kind of come out is that a lot of the big super spreader events like Sturgis, for example, I mean, you got all these dudes and ladies and other folks just, congregating outside in the streets, but then they're going to these bars and clubs and they're doing shots and they're dancing and they're partying and whatever. And that's where the real super spreader problem is happening. It's these indoor spaces. And, it's kind of hard to decouple. It's kind of hard to say, this is where the virus went crazy. This is where the problem started. But, ventilation, circulation of air, distance, the big thing with a virus like this is that it's about how much you're being exposed to in what period of time. Yes. And the more distance and the more airflow there is, the smaller that number gets.
Yeah, I've actually read somewhere that it's safer to be on an airplane than it is at a church right now, which fascinates me because you would think, because of the proximity and being in the tube, you would be more at risk. But I think it's because of the filtration. I think
the airline industry needs the money more than the damn churches do.
But it's also the singing and the chanting, which is then we get back to the concert situation. But I mean, like if you look at churches, look at all the super spreader events that happen in churches. There was a big one in Korea, for example. At a church very early on in the pandemic, but that's happened over and over again. There's been a whole bunch of church-related outbreaks because people are chanting together, they're singing together, and you just got to picture all these little droplets. It's spread by little tiny droplets, and the louder you are, the farther they fly. And
Yeah,
somebody else's
which
open mouth is right next to yours, and that's where they're going to go.
yeah, and then that's exactly the reason why my fiance and I won't go back to our church for probably not until 2022, because especially being down here in Texas, it's just one of these things where there's an exception with masks optional, and so because of what we know about those super spreading events and those types of things, we're gonna stay away. So it sounds like, and maybe. Your point about Sturgis kind of affected the way that I'm thinking about this. I was initially going to think, well, it's more likely for U2 at MetLife Stadium to come back quicker than it is the parquet courts
Right.
at like Metro in DC or something. So, but that might not necessarily be the case. Just would depend on like hotel accommodations and et cetera, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really is about how the show is structured. So there's actually one thing I really wanted to bring up just because I think it's kind of neat. There are a pair of European studies that both are simulating the dynamics that would take place at a real concert. There was one in Germany that was completed. I don't think it's been published in a journal yet, but there was a bunch of media coverage of it. And they had, let me think of the number, it was 1,400 people in an indoor concert. They had them dancing. They had drinks. It was I think 4 hours long, and they just basically kind of try to simulate what a normal club show might be. I think it was reduced capacity. They were encouraging people to wear masks when they weren't drinking or eating or whatever. And it definitely showed that if people adhere to basic measures. I mean, and again, the ventilation was a really big thing. They optimized the ventilation system in this venue. They made sure that there's rapid air exchange going on, that that there's as much circulation as possible. And I mean, you have to wonder. I mean, we were not to dwell on that Great White story, but you're talking about music venues being up to code. I mean, you think on all the small venues that you've ever been to a show for. How many of those? I mean, think about how sweaty you've ever come out of one of those shows. I mean, you go to a show there in like July or August. I mean, you're in Texas. I mean, but even in the Northeast, I mean, you go to a show in July or August. We got a Unitarian church in Philly that does shows. I came out of there. I felt like I lost 8 pounds of liquid weight just like sweating it out. I saw Ted Lee on the pharmacist. I was like 8 pounds lighter.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing shows at the Roseland Ballroom in New York where it would be like in the middle of winter. And then I would come out of that place sweating my balls off. So, I mean, it was interesting.
Mike, touching on your point earlier, I mean, call me a cynic, but expecting people, particularly Americans, to follow that kind of protocol, I think is a risky gambit.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
I'm an American, so I can criticize Americans, especially Americans, and how stupid and ass backwards not just the government but the people themselves have dealt with this virus. To expect people to follow protocol, keep your distance, wear a mask. No, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna take off my mask and I'm gonna spit and drink and do whatever. It's really risky, man. I'd rather just stay home.
Yeah, and well, this brings up an interesting point. So there are a couple of things that we've talked about here, which is one, the lack of up to snuffness of a lot of these venues that we know, in terms of crowd control, in terms of the codes, in terms of the building themselves, and then the safe occupancy being 400 and they get 500 people in there, all that stuff that we've always gotten used to. So does this necessarily mean what we're going to see is a new era of, is the concert going experience as we know it at that club level going to be different now? Do they have to do structural engineering, or do they have to sort of redo their physical plants to be able to accommodate folk and make people feel safe enough? And that brings it up to Artie's point too, that that there are a lot of morons in America that are just too lazy or too arrogant to follow the rules. And so if I'm in the concert venue business and I'm thinking about my insurance, I'm like, oh shit, how do I open up? And how do I make sure that these dumb fucks don't, get me in trouble?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of. I don't know if you guys remember ever seeing this during the past year. I mean, it was one of those kind of viral infographics that went around. And they call it the Swiss cheese model of illustrating protection. Have you seen this? Like the idea is that you've got these slices of Swiss cheese, they've all got holes in them. So like one slice of Swiss cheese is if you wear a mask and nobody else wears a mask, and like that doesn't really stop a lot of things from going through. And then the second slice of Swiss cheese is you wearing a mask and keeping say 6 feet away from other people. That's the second layer, and that means less things are getting through the holes. And the idea is that every layer of protection you have is collectively, and so it's an additive effect. And I think that's the same kind of thing with these venues. Because it's what we talk about with opening schools too. I mean, it's the same issue with opening schools. Like you can do lots of different things to get the right outcome. You don't necessarily have to do all of them, but you have to do several of them, and you can't just do one of them. So you could I mean, sure, you could have everybody be vaccinated, and that's great. That'd be wonderful if we had that kind of vaccine coverage where you could say everybody has to be vaccinated, they can go see the show, and nobody has to worry. That's not realistic right now. I mean, and you could say, okay, everyone has to have the state-of-the-art HVAC system installed in their club, and that's also everybody's got to mask up, and nobody can dance together, and
Yeah, and that's another thought that just went through my head. So we have the Save Our Stages Act.
Yeah.
And thank you for reminding me of the name of that, by the way. So they're getting the $16 billion. Okay, well, ostensibly that's meant to protect the artists and the support people and all of that. Well, how much money of that might actually end up going into, like you said, most of these broke-ass clubs, I mean, the last thing they're thinking about is installing a state-of-the-art HVAC system because they're all broke. So is some of that money going to subsidize some of this interchange, this overlap or this upgrade work?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think it's kind of like the same thing with the schools. I mean, there's money for schools, and the question is, all these old schools, are they getting the money they need? Yeah, and so if the money's not there for schools, how likely is it there for the small music venues?
I mean, this is a fascinating conversation because, I mean, look, we're ostensibly talking about live music and about our memories of these shows and accommodating these rock bands and all of that, but there's a larger thing. You've mentioned schools, we've mentioned churches, we've mentioned airplanes, and all of this. That when something like this, which has never happened in any of our lifetimes, except for like the people who are 110 years old, you have to basically redo everything. It's daunting, but maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe we can do things better. Maybe we can make things more right. Maybe even we can make things more fun.
Sure, yeah. An opportunity to get it right the second time around.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't bad things to do. I mean, like having good ventilation systems, in general is objectively a good thing. I mean, you think about just to draw a parallel, like think about how mild the flu season was this year because of all the countermeasures against COVID. I mean, and the same idea is like if you have a good ventilation system that prevents the spread of one kind of infection, that's going to work well for lots of things. I mean, maybe that means that a show is not going to turn into a flu party in the wintertime. That's just kind of that's a good infrastructure improvement just across the board. It costs a lot of money. I mean, it's that capital investment to get it going.
Yeah, and it actually reminds me of something as part of my I do a lot of marketing writing for law firms, and I just wrote an article about implementing employee vaccination policies. And the attorney that I was working with on the article, I was his ghostwriter, was saying that he's advising employers when they write their COVID-19 vaccination policies to just do it general so that you can capture the flu and then, the inevitable, COVID-20 and COVID-21 and COVID-22.
Yeah.
When they come down the pike, we're kind of in a pandemic era, perhaps. You just have it all in place, and so again, it's just you're rebuilding short term and thinking long term.
We got a little serious in this week's episode with all this coronavirus stuff, but we bring the levity back with next week's episode. 2 years ago, a writer named Rick Simmons wrote an article for RebeatMag.com listing week by week, quote-unquote, proof that 1974 was the worst year in the history of music. Well, Chris and I respectfully and vehemently disagree. Tune in next week as the Curmudgeons give their rebuttal to that online article, and we give our 10 reasons why 1974 did not suck at all. In fact, it was a pretty great year with some all-time great albums that were released within that year's 365 days, and we'll prove it. Follow us on Twitter at @CurmudgeonPod or email us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com.
All right, Mike. Now, I guess this kind of leads to the next question, the fourth big question. We talked about things from the perspective of the venues, the venue owners, the artists, the bands, management, blah, blah, blah. Now, how about the perspective from the actual fans, the paying customers who actually go to these shows? The question is, I guess, will they actually come back? Now, the answer for that may be yes, but there's more to it than that. I mean, think about people like me and Chris. Chris and I are kind of on the same page here with streaming, downloading, illegal downloading, which is pretty much what I do. YouTube. A year without drunken idiots, going to partying. A year without parking fees. A year without $35 T-shirts. I mean, to us, that sounds great. So why the hell venture back out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by telling on myself here a bit. I mean, I'm older than both of y'all. I'm a new father. We had a baby earlier, but not earlier this year, around this time last year. So my concert attendance expectations are considerably lower, COVID or no COVID at this point. But I still enjoy live. There are lots of things that really piss me off about the live. I'm definitely, that is where my inner curmudgeon definitely comes out at that in that venue setting as well. But I could see myself going back. But I think more broadly, I mean, you have to, for better or for worse, you have to look at all the people who didn't stop going to look at all the underground raves and parties that were shut down in Europe and the US. Look at all these these country western shows that happened in in Tennessee and Texas and look at all the spring breakers in Florida and the the bikers in Sturgis, and it's there's just all these example after example after example. People were doing this shit when there were thousands of people dying every day.
Right.
Literally thousands, multiple thousands of people dying every single day. A 9/11 every single day was happening, and these people were going to country western shows. I don't necessarily, and this doesn't reflect necessarily well on us as a species, but I do think that out of sight, out of mind is going to be the reality for a lot of people, just like it was at the height of the pandemic when I in Philadelphia was experiencing a relatively locked down and quiet city, not locked down in the extreme sense, but it was it was pretty quiet. It was people hanging out in the park, outdoor seating in a couple places, but it was definitely a shadow of the old Philadelphia. But if you lived in Florida or Louisiana or Texas, you probably had a very different experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, not necessarily in my case, because my fiance is a liver transplant recipient, so we've essentially been. She just went back to work this week, but we essentially spent a year indoors. And of course, I've joked with her. It's like, what will you still love me when we actually get to do something outdoors? Even going to parks has been a little rough down here because you're talking arboretums, which down here might as well just be swamps, and people are still walking around with no masks. with
That's the true test of a relationship, though, Chris. I mean, the fact that you guys were able to see your relationship through being shut in the same house together for a year. I mean, you guys can survive anything now. I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
that's what we call a battle
exactly.
test.
Yeah, exactly. It is battle testing, but it's interesting that we talked about that, and you made actually an excellent point, Mike. That something we don't often realize or acknowledge enough, that we're in a world where people can live their lives in an information silo. And so, our mindsets as, what I jokingly refer to myself down here as a Northeastern Yankee liberal. And so, we're Northeastern Yankee liberals. And so we have our kind of own latitude. And so when we look at things and like, oh, we have to be safe and this is a public health crisis, and we think about the economics and all of this, and, how not to be selfish and all of that. And then meanwhile, you've got uh, uh, an entire other silo that thinks this whole thing is nonsense, or they don't want to buy it, or uh, they see the greedy drug companies that are manipulating us to make the money, or in the most extreme cases, it's not the virus that's killing you, it's the masks and the ventilators.
Yeah.
Good old pandemic. And so
Yeah.
there is that perspective, but you do have these like Arturo Moxum, but I know a few of them, and they're friends, these the freedom
My freedom.
yeah exactly, the
America.
freedom people. And so and that's the thing. It's like, they're not letting this thing stop them from doing Sturgis based on their own worldview. They're not stopping, like you said,
Lack of worldview. It takes a lack of a worldview to do what these people do. Come on.
Yeah,
have
I mean,
a worldview.
that's the thing. It's look, a worldview is a worldview. My worldview is not your worldview. There's worldviews that are more grounded in reality. And I think that's the thing. Mike, you're a science guy. I mean, you're tuned in to the best virologists in the world, pretty much, on this one. But there's folks out there that just well,
And there are worldviews out there that are not grounded in plain old selfishness. Let's face it. A lot of this is selfishness.
Yeah.
It's selfishness and it's ignorance. These people deserve to be castigated and criticized because they.
but yeah,
Well,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it does deserve criticism for sure. Yeah.
yeah, but that is some of it. But look, I've always said that that the Fox Newses and the conservative news media, and then not only that, but even outfits like The Intercept and Breitbart, and even darker and sort of more bloggy worlds out there, that these people, in an objective sense, I think a lot of these people are quote unquote well informed. And so what it's done is, and I think this is one of the legacies of the first generation. We're in the second generation really now. The internet is the creation of all these these information silos. And so you've got this generation, you've got the formation of all these smart, stupid people. And one of my mother's best friends is one of these smart, stupid people. She's tangentially related, but she's one of these people that posts these memes that say that why are our Medicaid dollars going to treat illegal immigrants?
Oh, geez,
or these false equivalents. It's like, oh yeah, we're putting up illegal immigrants at hotels and ignoring homeless veterans. Share if you agree. So I said these people read, these people will watch things, they listen to radio. But
it's misinformation. They're reading and hearing a lot of wrong information.
Yes.
Something I'd like to, this I don't want to go too far on a tangent on this because it's easy to do, but I think there's been a lot of weaponization of disinformation has been a real problem in terms of like people picking their experts. With the internet, you have access to actual scientists, actual policymakers. They all go on Twitter, they all go on and they post online, and you can, you get people who shop for their experts, and they shop for experts that align with their worldview. And it's true with climate change, and it's been true with COVID.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that there is that sort of shopping, which ironically enough, I mean, the the most guilty parties of that are the big pharmas. They have 30 research studies and 2 of them that have positive results. That's the 2 they're going to go with. So it's not like this hasn't existed for all, but the larger point is, and I think that this is related, this idea of reopening safely and this idea of going back and all of that. I think it comes down to information discernment. I also think it comes down to trust. And I don't think there's any way that you can normalize trust, if you know what I mean.
You can't. And and I think you can teach critical thinking. And I think that's sort of an opportunity. And I do hope, that the rising generation of students, I'm not familiar with how schools are operating in this day and age. I'm going to find out in 5 years, but I'm not really sure what curricula look like. But I do think that it's more, I don't feel like I necessarily was given a solid grounding thinking about the provenance of information that I got when I was younger. It's like, oh, you hear this on the news, it must be true. It was on the news because somebody said it on television. and back when we were growing up, we didn't have Fox News, we didn't have MSNBC. You had the big 3 networks. You had your local newspaper, you had your city newspaper. Maybe you were fancy. You got the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, which makes me. But then, obviously, the related question is were we more bullshitted back then?
Well, it's interesting. I think, did you ever read Manufacturing Consent?
I have that book. It's a Noam Chomsky book. Yeah, it's a classic.
That was I read that in college, and it was and I know this is such a corny cliche, like, oh my god, I read Chomsky in college and it changed my life.
It still get you laid now.
I don't want to be that guy, but I do want to say that it's an excellent book in terms of deconstructing the way that media can be weaponized to sell a viewpoint without openly selling a viewpoint, like the way that an agenda can be buried in a media message. And obviously what we see with things like Tucker Carlson, there's no subtext, it's all text. The racism is right there for everyone to look at. But there's a lot of there's a lot of when you talk about things like scientific stuff, where there expertise is hard to come by in the general population. It's a lot easier to kind of smuggle a misleading message with a grain of truth in it, and I think that's a real issue. Like you can publish a bad study that says the conclusion that you wanted to say from your political goal, and to the untrained reader, they're going to say, oh, there's a graph. Look, this is a graph. I looked at this graph and it shows that all these people who supposedly died of COVID actually died of other things than COVID. They were actually, this person, these people all died of pneumonia. That's not COVID, that's pneumonia. Or, they can justify a misinterpretation because they have a figure, they have a table, they have exactly. a professor at some university who's saying this, and you don't have the context that, hey, this guy is not an epidemiologist, this guy is not a virologist, this guy is not.
He's a radiologist from Stanford.
And
exactly.
You have the flat out manipulation of data. The manipulation of data so it can reflect this person's political agenda and that conclusion. I want this conclusion to be this. So we got this data that doesn't really support the conclusion I want, but I'm gonna change the data and fuck around with it. Yeah. So basically, you're basically lying.
It isn't even. The thing is, it isn't even fudging. It's more like a sin of omission. You're misrepresenting. Like I think in very few cases is the data actively just fabricated from whole cloth. But what it is, it's kind of like you omit context. You omit the way the data was collected. Like you cover up the biases that are inherent in the way you conducted the study.
Right.
And if you are not aware of those biases, those can really change the way you interpret something. It's like it completely changes the perspective of what you're looking at.
Absolutely. And to sort of bring this back to the this topic of getting people back out in the clubs. Yeah, I think a lot of people really would like somebody to tell them, okay, it's safe to come back out.
Yeah.
Or this is how you're supposed to do it, or you should or shouldn't do it. I think what's going to happen is because there's all those mixed messages and because people are in their worldviews, I I just wonder if we're just going to have to go out and find out for ourselves, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I think COVID was kind of a worst case scenario pandemic in some ways, and I mean, I'm not going to, I'm not going to say that it couldn't get worse, but what I mean is that it's a virus that only makes a percentage of people sick. It's very contagious. It can make you extremely sick. It can kill you. It can make you have long-term symptoms for God only knows how long. But I think people are used to thinking of pandemics like Ebola. They watch a movie like Outbreak and they think, oh, I'm gonna bleed through my eyes. There's gonna be dead bodies piled in the street. That's what a pandemic looks like. And I think people have this kind of fanciful notion, and I think that really contributes to kind of not taking it seriously. Is that only 5% of people get seriously sick and only 1% die. That sounds really small. I mean, 1% sounds really small.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, but then you think there's 330 million people in the United States, and 1% of that is that's 3.3 million people. It's like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, so you're right. You're talking about the scale, but it's more subtle. And then, the ice trucks or the out back of the hospital is about the closest we get, or those aerial shots in New York of the mass graves are about as sci-fi as we've gotten. And so exactly. So which is funny because actually my fiance was binge watching Contagion on Netflix a few weeks ago.
Why?
I don't understand it either, because look,
maybe she should watch Chernobyl next. That's a nice uplifting mini series.
Exactly. I mean, here she is dealing with medical trauma, but she's watching Contagion. So like, what the fuck? It's interesting. So again, so we'll see what happens. I think it might take a few years, but my prediction is that some clubs will die, new clubs will show up. I think that eventually the folks that would see Kurt Vile now will see Kurt Vile then.
Absolutely,
I think that, and so I think it'll be there, but I just think it'll take a few years to get there. I think the $35 T-shirt will now be the $50 T-shirt. I think the $30
and I'll still buy them.
ticket will.
Yes, you will.
I think you'll still buy them, sure. But the $35 admission fee is now going to be like a $75 admission fee, and so, and then you just don't know. I mean, are there going to be dividers, or are there going to be
performers want to perform. I think that's something that we, to kind of go back to what I said at the beginning. These performers, they want to perform. And you had all these artists who are doing shit for free. Getting nothing in return except for love and appreciation, which is not nothing, but they weren't getting money, they weren't getting career advancement, but they were just doing it because they wanted to perform, they wanted to keep their fans happy, they wanted to keep a presence, and I think that's part of being an artist. I mean, I'm not an artist myself, so I'm maybe speaking a little bit out of turn, but speaking on their behalf, but I feel like I saw so many great intimate streams of people performing from their home studios, performing from their lawns, performing from their garages. And it was kind of beautiful. It was kind of beautiful to see how.
That's the thing.
This is an interesting segue, actually, to the fifth and final big question that we have. And it's basically, and kind of bringing this back to music, bringing this back to young bands / artists. And how do they recover from all this? How long will it take? Same with the venues, but we just spoke about that. Do they recover at all? A lot of these, like I said, a lot of these young bands and artists, they make their living from touring. Take touring away, they're gonna have to find other ways to make money if they don't have good licensing deals, if they don't have any merchandise being sold. If they do recover, how will it take years to get back in a touring rhythm that makes them all earn the living that they used to live? That they used to have. I know I'm going to make a point of this in every episode. I'm going to mention this guy's name at least once. But are we going to get more Ty Segals who pump out music like every 6 months, or Taylor Swift's for that matter, because she put out.
Or King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Right? So that's my question. Is like, how do the young the ones who are really affected by this are not the Beyoncés of the world. It's like
No.
it's the King Gizzards of the world. It's the Ty Seagulls of the world. The OCs of the world. I mean, how do they recover from all this? That's the big question, I guess.
I mean, I think it really depends on how well, there's a couple interesting things going on here. On the one hand, I mean, I was about to say something and I kind of thought better of it. I was going to say it kind of depends where you are in your career, and I think like if you've got a fan base, I mean, you could imagine, there's all sorts of like subscriber and patron models out there now. I mean, you could almost picture like Return of the Fan Club model, like from back in the old days, like back when you would join the REM fan club, and then they would send you a Christmas single every year, and and you get some collectible that nobody else had, and
people are going to have to get creative. Yeah.
I mean, so I could see that, like if you got a band, if you got a Ty Segall, for example, who isn't necessarily like everybody knows him, but like those who know him love him. And I could easily see him having a subscribers only kind of like, you're going to get this exclusive download. There's only, 150 downloads for my 150, top patrons or whatever. But, but the other point I was going to make, and I'm kind of rethinking that now, is about how, early stage artists are struggling. You think about all the people who made it on like Bandcamp and SoundCloud and all these artists who have just kind of like, look at the Billie Eilishes of the world who just kind of like came out of nowhere and then took over. I think that there's still a model for, I mean, one of the great, the internet has been a great equalizer for that.
And I mean, this is something that we've mentioned a couple times on this show, but the biggest and most reliable music distribution source in the U.S. right now is TikTok. I mean, this explains why Fleetwood Mac's had a top 10 last year. And you've had some artists that had actually broke. I think Megan Thee Stallion actually got a break from TikTok. And there's been a few artists in that boat too. So you never know. I mean, there's social media. And so I think that, there's a couple of things here. I think that we're really talking about the touring. I mean, these people always make music. Like you said, they'll find ways to perform, even if it's just for like 3 people in their lawn. If they have to revert to recording on an old 4-track in the basement, they will, and kind of self-produced, or they'll fuck around with Pro Tools and that kind of stuff. But just the idea of being able to go out there and make a living, and so I remember, and I've alluded to this a few times on this podcast, but in general, it got to the point where like 12 years ago, the best way to get a profile was to live next door to that music writer in either Brooklyn or Seattle. The same what happened to TV on the radio.
A lot of crappy bands have gotten big through that modus operandi.
So there's that, but I just wonder. I remember there was an interview with the dude from, I think his name's John McRae from Cake, like 10 years ago, where he was saying that it was getting to the point where with declining album sales and with, streaming and all that a lot of his peers were thinking about just, going and, selling insurance or, doing other, just retiring and going and doing other stuff. And I think we may get even more of that now, because it's like, he was still out there, pushing through touring and licensing and that kind of thing. Like, you just live your life on the road and make music when you can. I guess, and maybe you answered this earlier, is maybe that Save Our Stages Act will give these folks a boost that helps them get back on the horse. I don't know. It's and I think the same thing applies for older artists too. I mean, if you look at it, like David Crosby just sold the rights to his music and publishing for for several $1 million to Irving Azoff, and so it's not like David Crosby was like hurting for money or anything. But it's almost for these artists now, it's almost like estate planning. Yeah. You know what I mean? Is it worth going back on the road? And you can't do that. And so, so I can't make any new music. So I'm just going to.
Well, Crosby, it's an interesting, it's kind of a weird example, because he really wasn't doing that well off. Like he was doing really well off from touring. Take the touring away, and he wasn't making that much money. His royalty rates were really bad. Obviously, the streaming shit, he'd made almost nothing from that. He's not as big of a name on his own as, say, Bob Dylan or Neil Young or guys like that. So when Bob Dylan sold his catalog already for like I don't know how many millions of dollars, he didn't really need to do it. He was already a millionaire many, many, many times over from like God knows like half a century of touring, and all the royalty. And I guarantee you, his royalties were way higher than Crosby's. Not just because they are Bob Dylan songs. Many more people cover Bob Dylan songs than they cover David Crosby songs. I think I can safely say that. So Dylan was the one who really was not hurting at all. Like he honestly, Bob Dylan could stop touring right now, and he's very comfortable for the rest of his life.
Oh yeah.
David Crosby, not the same. David Crosby, very different scenario. There was an article in Mojo that he came really close to having to sell his house. Like that's how bad it was getting for him once COVID hit, and he couldn't go out there and tour because how little he got in royalties and how little he got in royalties, period, compared to other big names of his era, So yeah, Crosby, I can see why he did it, and he probably needed to do it. But Dylan, that's just Dylan saying, to me, that's just Dylan saying, I'm not going to tour anymore. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's liquidating an asset, basically.
Yeah, right.
So.
I mean, I think it would be great, and I have no necessarily evidence that this is going to happen, but it'd be great if this whole experience gave artists more leverage to push back against the fucked up royalty system and really just kind of retake what they're due.
Yeah,
and it'd be great if this motivated some sort of organized labor movement amongst the artists of the world to say, hey, you can't just keep profiteering off of our work.
It's one of the two reasons I don't. It's one of the two reasons I don't do Spotify. I think Spotify's evil.
Yeah. Oh, I hate Spotify for that reason.
Spotify's evil, man. What they pay artists is so little. The artists might as well put their stuff up for free. They're getting pennies.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they're getting.
Yeah. Look, I mean, from a selfish consumer point of view, I mean, I use Spotify just because it's just more convenient. I mean, you can access music at any time. It's like 50.
Dude, me illegally downloading Ty Segall's album and talking about it on this podcast serves Ty Segall better than Spotify does.
Yeah, in a way, you're right. I mean, assuming we scale up, Mr. Segall, we probably will make you more money than Spotify. No, I get that, and so it's not really about. Look, as a distribution source, Spotify is the greatest thing ever. As a marketplace, it sucks, and obviously the labels are eating this up. And not only, but see, it's strange because it seems like if I was a baby band, like think about a band like the Chats, who we've talked about on this show, 21-year-old kids. Their stuff is on Spotify too, but it's for distribution. But they could put their stuff out there on their own website with a tip cup, and they'll probably make infinitely more money.
Oh, for sure.
Doing it that way. The Patreon, which is, I've been trying to set up Patreon sites here for the last couple of months, and it's hard work, but like you said, that kind of model, I think is more likely to hit than Spotify. I think that, there's a few other things, like if you wanted to do your own paywall and, bands could sell their own, for, $50 a month, you get access to our whole catalog, and you get shows and stuff like that. So, and Pearl Jam's a good example of this, actually. They've been really successful self-promoting themselves, and they've said it. Their manager, and I think it might have been Stone Gossard, but this was back when they were promoting their album in 2013. I remember them saying that we're making more money now than we did when we were on the majors, doing our own distribution, but we're also working about 4 times as hard because we're in control of the distribution. We're in control of the promotion. we have to go out there and do everything.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, because look, musicians are not businessmen by nature. I mean, there's a glorious history of artists getting ripped off. And so how willing are you to work hard enough to succeed without all of these traditional distribution channels, including live music? So I don't know. It's interesting. So it's the next 5 years I think are going to go ways that we don't expect. And one last point. I'm not an expert. I'm not expecting comments from you guys, but non-fungible tokens. And of course Mike has it pumped down here on our video feed, which y'all can't see, but I'm curious to see what happens here, because Kings of Leon just released an album as an NFT. Will these NFTs be worth a shit? I mean,
and here's the other question: do Kings of Leon still have fans?
Apparently.
I mean, seriously, Kings of Leon.
No,
I liked them back in the day when they were a groovy little southern garage rock band, but then when they got supernova mainstream, they ended up sounding like the worst like a combination of the worst tendencies of U2 and Journey.
It was like beer commercial rock.
Yeah, exactly. Beer commercial rock.
Beer commercial rock. Speaking of which, I guess that if they can't tour, we're gonna see a lot of these acts show up on beer commercials.
Oh yeah,
or writing beer jingles.
You won't see a beer commercial. Pearl Jam, and I say that because I'm kind of giving a preview, a sneak preview of a future episode we might do regarding Pearl Jam. For all our listeners out there, if you're listening, there's a Pearl Jam centric episode around the horizon. So if you're a Pearl Jam fan, gear up for that.
Boy, we give all kinds of teasers and Easter eggs and scrambled eggs and all kinds of stuff. So Mike, let me, as a conclusory question here. So where are we now? I mean, kind of give us a, we've been talking about a lot of this stuff in the dynamics and in general, but to sort of give us the science journalist's report of the here and now of where we are with variants, vaccines, how close are we to herd immunity, et cetera, et cetera. So
we are in a very precarious place. I don't want to be too positive or too negative. I think that there's a lot of excessive sentiment in both directions right now. We are doing well at some things. We've got really well at protecting senior citizens. We've got really good vaccine coverage for the oldest and most vulnerable, which is terrific. But it's really important to understand that even in states that are doing the best job right now with vaccines, only about 30% of the population has gotten a first shot, and very few states have more than 20%. I think maybe only one or two states has even hit 20% of fully vaccinated population. Most of them are more around the order of like between 10 and 15%. That's not really very good.
No, not at all.
And Major League Baseball plans to have no fan limits in their stadiums now.
Well, the Texas Rangers are going to be at 100% capacity.
I mean, everything is opening. I mean, and it's a real problem. I mean, in Philadelphia, everything is reopening. In New York, everything is reopening. In Boston, the difference between blue states and red states at this point is more a matter of whether people are wearing masks or not. But in terms of business practices,
you said, exactly. Things are starting to reopen, but like I said, down here, the Texas Rangers out there in Arlington, Texas, I mean, they're going to have 100% capacity on opening day next week, which is scary.
People need to be very seriously concerned. The new B117 is what it's called, the variant that first showed up in the United Kingdom, is now on its way to becoming the dominant version of COVID in the United States. There are massive clusters of it in the Michigan, kind of the Great Lakes area, and in the Northeast. And the good news is that the vaccines just seem to work pretty well against it so far. And as far as we know, they do seem to protect against it. That's terrific.
What's the name of
the bad news?
What's the name of the new version of COVID again?
It's very fancy. It's B117.
Oh, it sounds like a robot.
Yeah, very memorable. It just rolls off the tongue, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a punk band from the early 80s, you know?
But no, it's really obnoxious, actually, because there's three major variants of concern right now that people are watching really closely. There's the Brazil one, the South Africa one, and the UK one. And they've all got these just ridiculous letter and number names that are impossible to keep straight until you've heard them 30 or 40 times. And I keep hearing that they're trying to come up with some sort of more popularizable name that they can use to refer them, but everything's either too cutesy or too technical.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I'm Dick and Harry, or
yeah, we live in a world that's populated by marketing guys like me when we're worried about the branding of a strain of coronavirus. So
there wasn't that says deadly but sophisticated.
Yeah. So we're going to build our brands. We're building our brand awareness on Twitter. Yeah. So the virus is going to have its own.
It's got mad followers, but the B117 it's scary. It spreads farther in terms of being more contagious. It is more dangerous. It does cause more severe disease. It does seem to have a higher death rate. It's everywhere now. I mean, it's kind of we know where it is. The problem with all the data is you're always looking at like a snapshot from the past. So we know where it was, a couple weeks ago. By now, we can safely assume that it's pretty much everywhere. So
I know it showed up in New York, New Jersey first, and I know like northeastern Michigan is on fire now. And amazingly, even though Greg Abbott got rid of the mask mandates and went 100% capacity about 4 weeks ago, we still haven't blown up, with the exception of the Panhandle is warming up. And then the last time I saw, Miami was warming up too, which, big shock, But
the next month is going to matter a lot. I mean, it's really scary. I mean, we've got anywhere between 60 and 80% of the U.S. population. I mean, leaving aside kids who aren't eligible right now, but we've got let's say maybe 70% of the adult population is not protected right now in any meaningful way. Restrictions are going down. This more dangerous and contagious variant is spreading rapidly. There are other variants that are present in the U.S. They have not become dominant, but there's no reason to think that they could not. I mean, the South African variant may be better at eluding vaccine protection. So I mean, it really is a race, and people have to be smart. I mean, so I think my parting thought is just don't let your guard down. If you've been vaccinated, keep wearing a mask. Be respectful and convey a good message of responsibility. And if you haven't been vaccinated, then don't let your guard down. This is really, we could be back very easily into lockdowns again in late 2020.
And that would absolutely kill the freaking touring industry. That would just destroy it.
Well, I mean, they're going into lockdowns in Europe right now. I mean, Europe is in a terrible situation because their vaccine coverage their distribution has been terrible. And so France is going back into lockdowns. Germany is on its way up. Sweden is on its way up. I mean, these countries are facing really severe next waves of COVID deaths and severe disease. And it could happen here just as easily. I mean, and every new case creates new opportunities for new variants. I mean, people have to be really diligent and take this seriously. And it sucks to be depressed when there's these great vaccines available and they're becoming available. I mean, I think the Biden administration is doing a great job in terms of like really putting the gas to the floor and getting those vaccines out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I read something this week that by late May we may be at surplus.
I'd love that. That would make me so happy if that was the case.
which it's a good. I guess that's a quality problem to have. But I don't know. I mean, and one question actually, I think I read that this week that the CDC was saying that these vaccines may actually be preventing infection as opposed to keeping you not dead. It's actually preventing infection,
which is the best news.
No, they seem to be quite effective at that too. And 80 or 90%.
Lagging, and again, it's like I have some friends. It's like they're very smart people, but they're not quite taking this seriously because it just comes down to selfishness and arrogance.
Selfishness, arrogance, and ignorance as well. Because you could be a very smart person and be ignorant. And remember,
absolutely true.
The root word of ignorance is ignore. That you know something's there, you don't want to pay attention to it.
Look,
I mean, the fatigue is real, and I get it, and I'm totally sympathetic to that. I mean, it's been a really shit year. I mean, it's been a really, really shit year, and I totally understand the psychology of that, about just being so exhausted and unable to find a fuck to give anymore. And then if you add that to also that kind of mentality, well, I've been doing this. It's kind of like I drove home drunk 4 times. And I didn't get into an accident. I guess drunk driving isn't as big of a deal as all those PSAs want me to believe.
Yeah,
I've been smoking for 10 years. I haven't gotten cancer yet.
Yeah. So it's like, well, I haven't gotten sick. And those types of things. But again, and even the vaccinated people, and I've been preaching this on my Facebook feed lately. It's look. I'm still planning to wear my mask through at least 2022. If I don't love you, I'm staying the hell away from you. And so we all have to continue to do our part. It's the only way we're going to get the herd immunity is if we participate. This is the participation.
And the important thing is it's not just I understand. Like when people say, well, just take care of yourself and forget about everything else and forget about everyone else. It's like, okay, on a micro level, okay, that's good. I understand that. But on a macro level, society cannot function that way. And especially when you're dealing with a pandemic, that's killed so many people. So over 1 million worldwide. So, I mean, it's not, you don't just have to be responsible for yourself. That's good. Okay, be responsible for yourself first. Great. But you also have to be responsible for the people around you as well. It has to be both. And you can't be a selfish, ignorant asshole about it. You have to fucking grow up. Okay?
Yeah.
Grow up.
I mean, I know. I mean, just Jenny and I have been. I mean, we saw this coming in like late January of 20. We were pretty attuned to this, but at least for us, I mean, our honeymoon in the first week of May is going to be in the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which may actually be the worst area in the country for participation sport on this thing. But yeah,
but you can keep a distance. You'll be outside. I mean, I think you'll probably be fine.
We'll be okay. But just in terms of like picking up food and being, if we're going to go into Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge or who knows, maybe we'll get to Dollywood. I'm a bigger Dolly person than she is. I see a brilliant songwriter and entrepreneur. She just sees tits.
Well, that Dolly helped get one of those vaccines out there too, right?
Yeah, she donated $1 million.
Dolly Parton's cool, man. I'm not a fan of her music that much, although her early singles are really good. But she's cool. Man. Everything I've read about her, she's like a super cool person.
She's a legit superhero. Yeah, she's an icon, a genuine icon.
I mean, she's interesting. Yeah, I mean, maybe she has a little bit of a dysmorphia or vanity issue or whatever. Well, professionalism. Yeah. The idea is like, she said in an interview that, hey, if there's a fire alarm in the hotel, I'm going to be ready with my wig and my makeup. She's going to be.
And she's a big Led Zeppelin fan.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. She's also been married to. She's been married to the same dude for like 52 years too. I mean,
no kidding. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't even know what her husband looks like or anything, but she's been able to have this private life. So
Mr. Dolly is a man of mystery.
yeah, he wears the coat of many colors in that house. So. Anyway, on that note, I think that this has been really thoughtful, and Mike, you've added a lot of color and informed our listeners here, and so obviously we're really grateful, and obviously we're hopeful, we're scared, but it'll be great, even if, like we said, we're not going to be running out to buy those $35 t-shirts and hang around in shoegaze. We want to live in a world where people still do, and we can get more of those, Built to Spill live albums, or some of these concert videos that Arturo reviewed last week. So we definitely want that to continue. So continue doing what you're doing, on the COVID-19 beat, and
Thank you.
keeping the world informed. And yeah, you're definitely our favorite inside source. The Curmudgeon Rock Report will keep on rocking if you do. Catch us where you catch all the podcasts. We know you love rock and roll as much as we do. Support us with donations at patreon.com/curmudgeonrock. Find show notes and more on our Medium site. Join us next time as rock nerds smack you with knowledge. Stay rude, stay crude, stay sophisticated. Thank you for listening.